Hello, I'm Elaine Stainton, Senior Specialist in Fine Art at Doyle. Today, we're going to be discussing this remarkable sculpture, which we will be offering on October 13th in our English and Continental Furniture and Decorative Arts sale. Aphrodite of the Gardens was one of the best-known images of this important goddess in the classical period of Greek art. Today, based on sculpture and paintings from later periods, we tend to think of Aphrodite as nude. However, before the middle of the 4th century BC, she was invariably shown as modestly clothed. A good example of how she was pictured in the mid-5th century BC is a painting in the bowl of an Athenian calyx, or drinking cup, from around 460 BC, now in the British Museum. Here the goddess is shown riding side saddle on a white goose, a bird sacred to her, dressed in an elegantly embroidered chiton, or chiton, as we say in English, a long tunic, and a red himation, an enveloping cloak or shawl, and finally a sakos, or snood. This is an ensemble that a well-dressed lady might have worn anywhere in the Hellenic world at this time. Perhaps the most famous of the images of Aphrodite from the 5th century, however, was Aphrodite of the Gardens, carved in marble by the Athenian sculptor Alcamenes around 420 BC. Alcamenes, whom the Roman naturalist Pliny described as an artist of the first rank in his natural history, probably succeeded Phidias as director of the Parthenon project when the master left Athens for Olympia around 435 BC, and he may well have carved the superb figures of 3 draped goddesses at the north end of the east pediment of the temple. We know from various ancient sources that from the late 5th century BC until at least the 2nd century AD, Aphrodite of the Gardens stood in or near the goddess's temple in a district of Athens outside the city walls called the Gardens, hence its name. Although the original work is long lost, we have a good idea of what the figure looked like from various Roman copies. Some of the best preserved of these include examples at the Archaeological Museum in Naples, in the Archaeological Museum at Heraklion, Crete, and in the Musée du Louvre in Paris. Another very fine example of this series will be offered at Doyle on October 13th. In all of these renditions, Aphrodite is shown dressed in her classic garb, or chiton and himation, and leaning on a pillar. The chiton is belted at the waist, creating an overflow of fabric that falls in exquisite folds around her body. Her relaxed pose, her air of urbane nonchalance, and the elegant handling of the drapery are all typical of what is known as the rich style that emerged in Athenian sculpture and painting during the 420s BC, pioneered by, among others, Alcamenes himself. It is not clear whether the original Aphrodite of the Gardens was the central figure at the temple outside the walls in Athens. However, the sculpture did provide the model for the cult image of the goddess at her sanctuary at Daphne on the sacred way to Eleusis. The Romans identified Aphrodite with their own goddess Venus, who, like her, was a patroness of love, beauty, and procreation. Even more important, Venus was also thought to be the ancestress of the Julio-Claudian emperors, and by extension of the entire Roman people. Given her connection to the imperial family and to the founding of the city, we can imagine that a figure such as Aphrodite of the Gardens would have resonated with Roman patriotic feeling in a way that a work depicting another goddess would not have. As previously noted, the piece to be offered at Doyle is one of a series of known Roman copies of Aphrodite of the Gardens dating to the 1st century AD. Clearly, the Romans' well-known love of Greek civilization at that time ignited an enthusiasm for copies of Greek sculpture from the classic period of the 5th century BC. One of the features of Roman sculpture, as opposed to Greek sculpture, are these wonderful deep grooves that appear in the carving, and they're made with a particular tool, and that is the so-called running drill. The running drill is a tool that looks rather like a screwdriver with a point, used by 2 men. You use a strap to rotate it back and forth so that it can drill into the stone, and then the other member of the team guides its passage across the marble and also leans on it so that there's a lot of force exerted against the stone, and it carves out these very deep grooves that you see, deep kind of round grooves that you see here. The Romans used that for expressive purposes. They liked the deep shadows that it created, and when you look at the sculpture from a distance, those deep grooves carved into the marble create an effect that's almost like drawing. Something else we should take note of are these calcite encrustations which appear on the marble. Chemicals in the soil react with the marble to cause these encrustations. They look rather like barnacles, and it's one way that we know that the piece is very old. When it was originally finished, this figure, like all Greco-Roman sculpture, would have been fully colored with encaustic, a paint composed of hot tinted wax. Those hues are now lost to us, although we can guess at them. The drapery of some ceramic votive figures of ladies from the Greco-Roman world show traces of color, usually pastels, often in sophisticated combinations, including yellows, lavenders, and greens. Today, the surface of the stone shows that it was buried perhaps for many years at some time in its history. We can only guess where this beautiful work was made and how it found its way from its home in the 1st century AD to its new life in the present day. I'd like to invite you to view this remarkable sculpture at Doyle or to visit our website for more information.